Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Gender rights in discourse analysis. Interactive assistant gender rights refer to the social, political, and legal rights that individuals are entitled to, regardless of their gender. These rights include access to equality in areas such as employment, education, healthcare, legal protection, and freedom from discrimination and violence. In discourse analysis, the study of gender rights involves examining how language constructs, reflects, and challenges societal norms, power relations, and ideologies surrounding gender equality. Discourse analysis explores how conversations about gender rights shape public perception, influence policymaking, and either perpetuate or disrupt gender-based inequalities. Discourse analysis of gender rights focuses on the ways in which language is used to discuss issues such as equal pay, reproductive rights, gender identity, LGBTQ+ rights, and representation. By analyzing political speeches, media coverage, legal texts, and activism, discourse analysis reveals how gender rights are framed, how different actors, e.g., governments, corporations, activists, use language to advocate for or resist change, and how power dynamics influence the negotiation of these rights. Key features of gender rights in discourse analysis. 1. Framing of gender equality. Framing is the way issues are presented and defined in discourse. Discourse analysis examines how gender rights are framed in public debates, whether as an issue of fairness, human rights, or economic necessity, and how these frames shape public opinion and policy. Example: in a political speech, a leader might say, "Gender equality is not just a moral issue, it's essential for economic growth," framing gender rights as both an ethical and practical concern. Discourse analysis would explore how this framing appeals to different audiences by linking gender equality to broader social and economic goals, potentially gaining wider support for gender rights initiatives. 2. The language of legal and policy discourse. The discourse of laws and policies surrounding gender rights often reflects broader societal attitudes toward gender. Discourse analysis examines how legal language either supports gender equality or maintains existing power imbalances by reinforcing patriarchal norms. Example: a law aimed at promoting equal pay might state, "No employer shall discriminate between employees on the basis of gender with regard to salary," using formal language to guarantee equality. Discourse analysis would investigate how this language enshrines gender equality in law, but might also explore how loopholes or vague terminology in legal texts leave room for continued inequality. 3. Gendered language and stereotypes. Gender rights discourse is often shaped by gendered language, which reinforces stereotypes about men and women's roles and capacities. Discourse analysis examines how gendered language in media, policy, or everyday communication influences perceptions of gender roles and limits or expands individuals' access to rights. Example: a job posting might say, "We're looking for a strong leader with a proven track record of assertiveness and competitiveness," using traditionally masculine-coded language. Discourse analysis would explore how the use of such language in professional settings reinforces stereotypes that align leadership qualities with masculinity, potentially discouraging women from applying. 4. Intersectionality in gender rights discourse. Intersectionality refers to how different aspects of identity, such as race, class, sexuality, and ability, intersect with gender to shape individuals' experiences and access to rights. Discourse analysis looks at how language reflects or ignores the intersectional nature of gender rights. Example: an activist might say, "The fight for gender rights must include the voices of women of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, and people with disabilities," emphasizing the need for an inclusive approach to gender equality. Discourse analysis would examine how this language challenges a one-size-fits-all approach to gender rights and advocates for a more nuanced understanding of inequality. 5. Resistance and opposition to gender rights. There are often resistance and opposition to gender rights movements, framed through discourses that seek to preserve traditional gender roles or challenge perceived threats to social order. Discourse analysis investigates how anti-gender rights arguments are constructed, and how language is used to delegitimize efforts toward gender equality. Example: Opponents of gender rights might say, gender quotas in the workplace are unfair and undermine meritocracy, framing gender equality measures as incompatible with fairness. Discourse analysis would explore how this language positions gender rights as threatening traditional values of merit and individual achievement, often using gender-neutral terms to mask underlying biases. 6. The language of activism and advocacy. Activist discourse surrounding gender rights often uses empowering and mobilizing language to challenge inequality and call for social change. Discourse analysis looks at how activists use language to frame gender rights as human rights and how they mobilize supporters through slogans, campaigns, and public speeches. Example: an activist group might use slogans like, "Equal pay for equal work," or "My body, my choice," in rallies advocating for gender rights. Discourse analysis would explore how these concise, impactful phrases distill complex issues into digestible demands, framing the fight for gender rights as urgent and fundamental. 7. Media representation of gender rights. The media plays a significant role in shaping public understanding of gender rights issues through news coverage, editorials, and social media. Discourse analysis examines how gender rights are portrayed in the media, which voices are amplified, and how narratives are shaped around key issues such as reproductive rights, workplace equality, or gender identity. Example: a news outlet might cover the introduction of new legislation on transgender rights, using language like, "A controversial bill allowing transgender people to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity has sparked public debate." Discourse analysis would examine how the use of the word controversial frames the issue as divisive and how such framing influences public attitudes toward gender identity rights. Methods for analyzing gender rights in discourse. 1. Critical discourse analysis, CDA. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, explores how language in discussions of gender rights reflects power relations, ideologies, and societal structures. CDA focuses on how dominant discourses reinforce or challenge gender-based inequalities, and how language is used to negotiate power. Example: a CDA of parliamentary debates on gender equality might reveal how male politicians dominate discussions, using dismissive language toward gender rights initiatives. The analysis would explore how this language reflects broader patriarchal structures and reinforces male privilege within political institutions. 2. Frame analysis. Frame analysis investigates how gender rights are framed in public discourse, whether as a human rights issue, a social justice concern, or an economic necessity. This method looks at how framing affects public opinion, policy, and activism. Example: in a debate on paid parental leave, one side might frame it as a fundamental right for all parents to bond with their children, while opponents frame it as an unnecessary burden on businesses. Frame analysis would examine how these contrasting narratives shape public attitudes and policy decisions regarding gender rights in the workplace. 3. Narrative analysis. Narrative analysis examines how stories about gender rights are constructed in media, policy, and personal contexts. This method focuses on how these narratives shape the understanding of gender equality and rights, and how they construct identities of victims, advocates, and opponents. Example: in a documentary about gender inequality in the workplace, the narrative might center on the story of a woman who successfully challenged wage discrimination, portraying her as a hero. Narrative analysis would explore how this story of empowerment frames gender rights as a battle for justice and serves as inspiration for others to seek change. 4. Intersectional discourse analysis. Intersectional discourse analysis focuses on how multiple identities intersect in discussions of gender rights. This method analyzes how language addresses the complexity of experiences based on race, class, sexuality, and other factors, revealing whether discussions of gender rights are inclusive or exclusionary. Example: a public debate on reproductive rights might focus exclusively on middle-class women, ignoring how women of color or women in poverty experience unique barriers to accessing healthcare. Intersectional discourse analysis would explore how these omissions reflect broader patterns of exclusion in the discourse on gender rights. Examples of gender rights in discourse analysis. Example 1. Political debates on equal pay. In a parliamentary debate on equal pay, a politician might argue, "We need to close the gender pay gap to ensure fairness and economic growth for everyone." Discourse analysis would explore how this language frames gender rights as a matter of both fairness and national economic progress, positioning equal pay as beneficial for society at large. Example 2. Media coverage of reproductive rights. A news report on abortion rights might describe the issue as a highly divisive topic that pits religious beliefs against women's rights, framing it as a conflict between competing values. Discourse analysis would investigate how this framing influences public perceptions of reproductive rights and the extent to which it aligns with broader societal debates about morality and freedom. Example 3. Activist campaigns for LGBTQ+ rights. An LGBTQ+ rights organization might use slogans like, "Love is love," to advocate for marriage equality. Discourse analysis would explore how this simple, powerful message frames LGBTQ+ rights as fundamentally about equality and love, appealing to universal human values to mobilize support. Example 4. Resistance to gender quotas in the workplace. Opponents of gender quotas in boardrooms might argue, quotas undermine merit-based hiring and promote tokenism, framing gender rights initiatives as harmful to business practices. Discourse analysis would examine how this language positions gender equality as a threat to fairness and meritocracy, challenging progressive gender policies. Example 5. Gender identity rights in legal discourse. In a court case about the rights of transgender individuals, a judge might say, "The law recognizes the right to self-identify one's gender, but this must be balanced with public concerns about privacy and safety," framing the issue as one of balancing rights. Discourse analysis would explore how this language frames transgender rights as conditional and negotiable, reflecting societal tensions around gender identity. Challenges in analyzing gender rights through discourse. 1. Resistance to change. Discourse about gender rights often faces significant resistance, with opponents framing gender equality as a threat to tradition or social order. Discourse analysts must carefully navigate these resistance narratives to understand how they shape public opinion and policy. 2. Cultural sensitivity. Discourse around gender rights varies significantly across cultures, with different societies having distinct norms and values around gender roles and rights. Discourse analysts must be sensitive to cultural contexts when analyzing how gender rights are discussed and advocated for. 3. Intersectionality. Discourse on gender rights can sometimes be narrow in focus, overlooking the intersectional dimensions of race, class, or sexuality. Discourse analysts must ensure that these intersecting identities are considered in their analyses to provide a more holistic understanding of gender rights. Conclusion. Gender rights are a fundamental aspect of social justice and human rights, and discourse plays a crucial role in shaping how these rights are understood, advocated for, and resisted. Through discourse analysis, researchers can examine how language reflects societal norms, power relations, and ideologies around gender, as well as how it is used to promote or resist gender equality. By analyzing political debates, media coverage, legal language, and activist campaigns, discourse analysis uncovers the ways in which gender rights are framed, whose voices are heard, and how power is negotiated in the struggle for equality. Understanding the role of language in the discourse on gender rights is essential for advancing social change and ensuring that all individuals, regardless of gender, have access to equal rights and opportunities. Frequently asked questions. What are gender rights in the context of discourse analysis? Gender rights refer to the social, political, and legal rights individuals are entitled to, regardless of their gender, encompassing equality in employment, education, legal protections, and more. Discourse analysis examines how language shapes, reflects, and challenges societal norms, power structures, and ideologies surrounding gender equality. How does discourse analysis explore the framing of gender equality? Discourse analysis looks at how gender rights are framed in public discussions, whether as moral imperatives, economic necessities, or social justice issues. For instance, framing gender equality as essential for economic growth may appeal to broader audiences, influencing public perception and policy. What role does legal and policy discourse play in gender rights? Legal language can either support gender equality or maintain existing power imbalances. Discourse analysis examines how policies are worded, whether they explicitly promote equality or contain ambiguities that allow continued inequality. How does gendered language affect discourse on gender rights? Gendered language reinforces stereotypes, such as job ads emphasizing traditionally masculine traits like assertiveness, which may discourage women. Discourse analysis studies how such language perpetuates gender roles, impacting individuals' access to rights. What is intersectionality, and how does it factor into discourse on gender rights? Intersectionality considers how overlapping identities like race, class, and sexuality interact with gender. Discourse analysis examines whether discussions of gender rights acknowledge these intersecting factors or remain exclusionary, revealing the inclusivity or bias within the discourse. How is resistance to gender rights analyzed in discourse? Discourse analysis investigates how opponents frame gender rights as threats to traditional values or meritocracy, using language that masks biases and positions progressive changes as harmful. This helps reveal strategies that maintain gender-based inequalities. What methods are used to study gender rights in discourse analysis? Critical discourse analysis, CDA, examines power relations and societal structures reflected in language. Frame analysis explores how gender rights issues are presented and their influence on public opinion. Narrative analysis studies the stories told about gender rights and how they shape perceptions. Intersectional discourse analysis focuses on whether discourse considers the complexity of identities beyond gender alone. Can you give examples of gender rights in discourse analysis? Political debates, analyzing statements like gender equality is essential for economic growth to understand how policies are framed. Media coverage, studying how terms like controversial bill shape public attitudes toward gender identity rights. Activist campaigns, assessing slogans like equal pay for equal work to see how movements communicate urgency and justice. What challenges do discourse analysts face when studying gender rights? Resistance to change. Discourse often encounters opposition that frames gender rights as threats, requiring careful navigation of these arguments. Cultural sensitivity. Norms around gender vary by culture, necessitating culturally informed analysis. Intersectionality. Analysts must ensure intersecting identities are considered to provide comprehensive insights into gender rights discourse. How does discourse analysis help in promoting gender rights? By uncovering the language strategies that either reinforce or challenge gender-based inequalities, discourse analysis helps identify where improvements are needed in public, media, and policy language. This understanding can empower advocacy, ensuring more inclusive and effective communication around gender rights.